My name is Knopp. I was a corporal and my service number was VX102506.
Yeah, Richard Browne, VX50598, private.
I'm Brendan, I play at Melbourne High, and I'd like to know where you served.
I fought in New Guinea in World War II. I served in Ivory, Wewak and Alandia.
I served in the Middle East, Darwin and New Guinea. I fought against the Japanese, the Germans, the French, Italians, and that was about it.
How did the war affect your life the most?
Well, I think it teaches you a lot of tolerance of others. You learn to tolerate people that you normally wouldn't tolerate because you're so dependent on the people that are with you. 24 hours of the day you're very dependent and they're very dependent on you, so you learn a lot of tolerance from it.
Well, I miss my home, I miss my wife and Kitty and all the things I did at home. I was comfortable each night in the bed, never had anything like that. I suppose I was pretty lonely for a start, leaving your wife and Kitty.
When you first arrived, what were your living conditions like in the jungle?
We landed at Tadji, up towards north a bit, and we got the Americans took us in on landing barges, and we got off in the water and we're up to our chest in water and waded into the beach. Guns over our head to keep them out of the water, and a haversack on our back. It got a bit of water in it, and I think it wasn't easy. Pretty hard some of those nights. Yeah. Yeah, and I had a ground seat we pulled over us to stop the rain. Yeah, when you're up front you only need a blanket.
Oh, horrible, right from the word go. It was heavy going. Mud and swamps, and the tracks were up to your ankles in mud. So the trekking was very heavy. There was streams and rivers, they seemed to be everywhere. You seemed to be crossing them. It never seemed to be stopped raining. It was very tough going, you know. There was no a little two-man shelter which you could put up over yourself if you had time. But generally it was a pretty hard slog, physically demanding, and really pushed you to the limit of endurance, really, and a bit beyond at times.
I'd just like to ask how long you served for.
I served the entire whole 6 years of the war. Not entirely I was in the army before the war. I was 3 years in the army before the war broke out, so I was called up on the night war broke out actually. So I served the entire war really.
I joined up in 1942 just after Darwin got bombed, and then I was in the army until 1946 when the war finished. It finished in 1945, but I was still in New Guinea and waiting to come home.
Just wondering how you felt about going into war, and how did you actually sign up? Was it a voluntary thing, or were you forced to go in the war? And when you decided to go to the war, how did your parents feel about it?
No, I volunteered. I was 19. Well, Mum wasn't at all happy, wouldn't sign my papers. My father didn't mind, he'd been in the army before. So I just put my age back and went ahead that way. And to save Mum that job of, she didn't like the idea, thought she might be saving or signing my death warrant, so she couldn't do it. I got over it that way and no problems.
I said, well, you got to stop these Japs from coming and taking Australia, we're in trouble. Yes. I didn't discuss it much with my parents. I just told them that I had a call up and I was going. Didn't say much, though I suppose they were quite happy. I suppose because I was doing something about it. I just went down and joined the Air Force, waiting for a call from them. And the bloke said to me, that'll come through shortly. It never come through. Before the war, I worked at Patterson's as a furniture salesman. Patterson's didn't like it. They put an exemption on me joining the Air Force, and I was still at Patterson's working when I got the call up. So I thought, well, the next best thing is to take a call, and if I get called up, I can transfer. The chap at the Air Force said, you know, I could transfer it to the Air Force, but I never got it.
What weapons did you use?
A 303 rifle, an Owen gun, a biggest machine gun, and a Bren gun mainly. Used to fire a Bren gun from the hip. I had some grenades too.
Bren gun, rifle, the Owen gun, another thing we used to call the elephant gun, which was an anti-tank gun, horrible thing, and just the ordinary hand grenades of course.
Did you have any close shaves?
Well, we were doing an attack on the Butt aerodrome and there was some fighting going down on the left of me. I looked down there and a red flash came. I was right on the edge of a shell hole at the time and I thought it had been fired at me. Well, you don't see a red flash, but it's just one of those instant reactions, and I just fell straight into the hole. Wouldn't be in there 2 seconds, I don't think, and there was a burst of machine gun fire. It ploughed into the earth just above my head. I couldn't get any lower, and it followed by 2 or 3 bursts in there, and it was 8 o'clock in the morning. Another chap jumped into the hole, thought I'd been hit, and we were there for 8 hours before we could get out. In fact, the whole company was pinned down by machine gun fire, and this particular gun was only about 30 yards ahead of us, directly in front of us, and except for that red flash, I think it would have sawn me in half. So I was very lucky. Something I never forgot. How I got out of it that day, I don't know.
What was the biggest adversity you faced?
I would think fear would be the greatest adversity. You've got to overcome it.
Well, these Japs were behind a tree and they had a woodpecker lined up, but they were throwing grenades, and I thought, gee, what's going on? I thought, well, they got no ammunition. Well, they had a woodpecker gun and would have cleaned us out. So we decided we'd take the risk of getting on them and clean them out themselves. One came at me with a bayonet. Yeah, we fixed him up. So they were throwing the grenades out round the tree to us on the other side. I kicked them away in the river. There was 3. and the fourth one, I missed it, and it went off. Right, my foot. I stand on my left foot, and I was kicking with my right foot, and it went off and got my left foot. Ones are plastic ones that went off. And when they went off, that was a daisy cutter, got into my ankle, down at low level. I didn't realise it would hit me until one of the cobbers said, "Hello, Roy, what's wrong with your foot?" And I said, "Nothing." And he said, "It's full of blood." "Your boot's full of blood." There.
During the war, did you ever suffer from malaria?
Well, I wasn't feeling well, and I said I'd like to go down and see the hospital. And they let me go. Off I went, and I went down to the hospital. Well, I didn't quite make it, and I got down, just down, sat down and falled over against a bit of a tree in the scrub, and a soldier come along and he said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Get on your feet." And I said, "I can't." He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I got malaria." He said, "How do you know you got malaria?" I said, "I don't know, but I've got it. It's something wrong. Can you get someone to me?" And anyhow, they went up to the hospital and got an orderly and come down, and they put me in the hospital there. I was out in about a fortnight and back to fighting, yes.
I did get malaria, yeah, malaria. I had malaria and I was going down on a boat to do a landing at Dove Bay. And I was that crook when I got on the barge. I just lay down the bottom of the barge and I didn't care whether it floated, sank or what it did. And it was very hard going when I hit the water to get off. Just a couple of mates were really good. They were pretty much looking after me, and they looked after me pretty well. Eventually get over that, and actually I needn't have got on it. I had a temperature of 104. Went to the RAP that day and I was so determined to go on it. While he wasn't looking, I shook the thermometer and it went down to 97 point something, and he said to me, "You're below normal." So there's not much wrong with that, is there? And he didn't know much about it, only good for giving you an aspro and stuff. And he said, "Oh no, it's all right, I suppose." So I said, "Well, that's okay, I'll be fine, thanks." But off I went. Otherwise I've been taken out of it. But I just wanted to be there, I wanted to go with it. I had a number of bouts of malaria after I came home, which was pretty draining. It's a pretty horrible thing to get. And it leaves you with an enlarged liver, and well, not large liver, but large spleen, which makes things a bit uncomfortable at times.
Did you ever rescue anybody under fire?
Yes, my brother. He'd been wounded, and I thought he'd been killed actually. And I looked across to him and he's sitting up bolt upright. So I yelled out to him a number of times to get down. He was sitting duck really, because the Japanese were high up and we were low down. And I thought I just had to do something and get him out of there. So I went over to him and got him on my back and took him to safety.
This bloke, Don Tucker, was a cobber of mine, and they said he's been bitten and no one will go out and get him. They said no, they don't want to go out. It's no man's land out there. They get killed. They said they weren't going out, there's suicide out there. They go out. I'd just come back off a patrol, and when I come back, called Dick, he said I was wanted, but Snowy reckoned it was a pretty tough job. He said, "You don't have to go if you don't want to." I said, "I'll go." So I just said, "Well, I'll go." Yes, I found him. Yes, he was pretty badly wounded in the face. he had a dead Jap on his chest. And I said, "It's Norm, Don, if you just stop there, leave the dead Jap on you and we'll come back for you." Yes. So stop here and I'll be back. He said, "Thank God for that." And he reckoned he was all right. "You're going to walk home." And I said, "You're going to stop where you are until we get someone to help you home." Yes. When I come back, I said I'd found him. I had no trouble getting blokes to come with me. I said to the rest of the blokes, he was going to give me a hand. No, I had no trouble at all. I want 7 blokes to come with me. We picked the dead Jap up and placed him on the side and picked him up and headed for home. On the way back, we run into a patrol of Japanese and they shot 3 of the carriers, and so I put the blokes in a shell hole and we formed a perimeter around him and we cleaned up the Japs, no trouble. We carried on a stretcher back to our base, and I wanted to go with him down to the hospital, and they said, "No, you blokes have done enough."
How hard was it on your loved ones back home, like your family?
I think it was very hard on them day to day, not knowing what was happening to us or not being aware of it. Being there, you're aware of everything, but at home, they get all these sorts of news flashes and things coming in, so they're never too sure what's going to happen. After my brother was wounded, the family were pretty uptight as to what was going to happen to me, but I reassured them I was okay. It's just very hard on them.
Well, pretty hard. He was on home with a young kiddie. I think Judy was only about 5 months when I went away. She was doing it hard. No, she never said anything. Oh, you were concerned that the Japs never got there. I felt that we've got to stop the Japs because they're in New Guinea and Australia's the next move, and they've got to stop them from taking Australia. Yes.
How important was mateship during the war for you?
It means a lot. Your life depended on the mateship, and a lot of that mateship still exists with the chaps that are still left. There's not many left, but I still have contact with the chaps I was with, and they're great mates. It's something totally different to mateship in normal everyday life. It's something you've become 24 hours a day. You're dependent on everybody around you, and they're dependent on you. So it's a special type of mateship you don't encounter in everyday life.
Well, it was necessary to have your mates. Yes. You had to look after them and they had to look after you. Jimmy Godsell said to me one day, we were in action, and he said, "Now you get the buggery out of this, you've had enough of it." He said, "I'm going up in your place." No, he went up. Yeah. He went up and got killed. Yes. Yes. Poor old Jim. He reckoned I'd done enough up there. He said, "I'm going in your place." That was mateship.
What was the most scared you were during the war?
I get scared every day. Every day, I think. Before it started, once things got started, that fear leaves you completely. You're so concentrating on what you've got to do and what your destination is and what you've got to do when you get there. Fear doesn't come into it. The fear is before you start. You've something you've got to overcome. Now, everybody feels it. Anybody that said they don't is simply lying.
Oh, I think the most scary job is out as front, as the lead in New Guinea on the track. When you had to have a turn to take the lead, you broke out in front, leading the way. You were looking for Japs and they were looking for you. That was scary. You knew they were out there, you had to find them.
What first ran through your mind when you found out you were coming home?
Couldn't believe it. I'd given up hope. That was a great feeling, mainly because I came out on a point system and I had a fairly high points, so I was coming home a lot earlier than most of them. It was a great feeling, wonderful feeling. It still took 3 months to get home after the war finished, but it was nice.
That's very good news. I was to come home on the Shropshire, but I didn't. I came into the bay and picked up troops and there was no room for us. So I came home on the Duntoon, back to Australia, to Townsville. From Townsville I came down by rail. I got home at Royal Park. I'd sent a telegram to Anne and told her I was on the way down, and she came down to Royal Park where she found out where they were going to land us, and Jean Matthews came with her. She went on one gate and I went on the other, and Jean said to some of the soldiers that were there, "Do you know Knopp?" And they said, "Yes, he's over amongst that mob over there somewhere." He said, "Can you find him?" And he said, "His wife's round on the other gate." So anyhow, they come over and said, "Your wife's there, you found her." And I said, "What? My wife, where is she?" And over at the gate. I dropped all my gear and everything and went over and I said, "She's not my wife." I looked at her, they said, she said, I am. And the bloke said to me alongside me, he said, "What's wrong with you? You don't know your own wife." I said, "That's not my wife." So Jean went round and got Anne off the other gate and brought her back. That was different. When I saw Anne back in Royal Park, I was on top of the world.
Were you involved in the surrender?
I made a blotter that they used to sign the surrender ceremony over there out of Queensland maple and Guinea cedar and some plate brass that we'd kept was lying in a shed. We used that to cut out the emblem of the 6 divvy out of brass and fired it down.
What was the most important lesson you learned after the war?
How futile war really is. It destroys a lot of people, destroys a lot of lives. For what reason?
The war is no good for anybody. It's no good. No.
If you could have taken one positive thing away from the war, what would it have been?
Patterson's didn't pay me back pay or anything, and I didn't get my job back. So I opened a furniture shop myself. Finished up with 4 of them.
What does Anzac Day mean to you?
I think it's a day to remember all your old comrades and get together with them if you're able to. It's always something you look forward to. You used to have reunions and that type of thing, and they were always very enjoyable to catch up with people you hadn't seen for a long time and see how they were coping. Some were, some weren't. And it was just nice to be able to meet with these sort of people. I think the dawn service is the most touching part of the whole day, really, rather than the march itself. It's emotional and I think it's more in keeping, you know, with the day itself.
Anzac Day is a day to me that I think of all the mates that are left over there. There's lots of blokes that I knew that are not there, they're passed on. And I feel very sad about that. And I think to myself, well, I'm lucky to be alive.
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.